So my name is Yogita, and I am from Brentwood Secondary College, mainly, teaching VCE and Digitech in from 7 to 10. Um, and I'm sort of very happy to be part of DLTV and the subcommittee, and we have been putting this together for a while, which has been a lot of work going, in the hindsight. So as soon as the presentation came in, I sort of thought of Kevork, the first person sort of thinking of bringing his expertise to the presentation because I have been through a few presentations with him, and they have been really engaging and insightful. So I'm sort of going to be, you know, enjoying this session with you all. It's the modern network security one. Kevork has been teaching VCA and VET IT since 1988 at Forest Hill College and Ringwood Secondary College. More recently, he has been establishing pathways for VET students to articulate into higher qualifications such as certificate book, diploma, and advanced diploma courses that he has set up at Ringwood Secondary College. I think I had him coming and presenting at Brentwood Secondary as well, so which was really amazing to hear him. Ringwood Training has been awarded Victorian Small RTO of the year 2019 and was the finalist of 2020. He has been also involved in the HMESS algorithmics course, and we just heard Kevin sort of saying Lola is, one of those persons who's getting a bit of learning about algorithmics this year. So you may also have seen Kevork through EduList that he has established in 1996. Currently, Kevork is teaching VET IT, so he's going to bring a VET twist to our VC curriculum with higher qualifications at Ringwood Secondary College. So welcome, Kevork. And hopefully we are going to enjoy this session.
Thank you, Yogita. I certainly hope you'll enjoy it. Just want to make sure everyone can see my PowerPoint. I've shared my screen. Is that visible for everyone?
It is actually.
Yeah, it's fine.
Excellent. And because I don't think we've got a very large group, I guess you can jump in and ask questions, though that might be against the rules. I'll leave that up to Kevin or leave it to the end.
You're welcome to put stuff in the chat, and I can always interrupt, or we can take them all at the end, okay?
Sure. When I got the gig for this, I thought, wow, what a huge topic, because, I mean, how can you cover cybersecurity in 30 minutes? It's like, tell me everything about World War II in the next 30 minutes. Where do I start? So, but I've tried to summarize what we teach here, and hopefully, based on the study design of VCE IT and the elements and the outcomes that are security focused, we'll be able to address those key points sufficiently. And then I'll give you some tools at the end to take it further. So I know when I go to conferences, I like to take something to use in the classroom. So I'm planning to give you that today rather than just tell you what I know or don't know. So let's do this. I'm Kevork Krozian. I'm at Ringwood Secondary College. I'm the IT Pathways Manager. And I'm a Cisco security and a Cisco cybersecurity operations instructor, as well as Microsoft and related industry qualifications. So Ringwood Secondary has a training organization, registered training organization that's part of Ringwood Secondary College called Ringwood Training, and it is part of the secondary school. And we were RTO of the year last year, Victorian small RTO of the year. We didn't take on Chisholm or Box Hill, they're huge. And this year we were a finalist, so that was quite a bit of kudos. We deliver I've been here for 10 years and I've started off with Year 12 Soft Dev and then the VET IT Certificate 3, VET IT Cisco, VET Cisco, CCNA. And each year I've just added a qualification gradually, Cert 4s, couple of diplomas and a couple of advanced diplomas to give students pathways beyond Year 12 into employment and further training. And we have about 125 students who partake in VET in schools courses here across from about 40 schools. and around 50 students who are post-school students who finished Year 12 and have stayed on with us to study further qualifications like the higher ones here, and also are employed in the IT industry. So almost 2/3 of our current post-school students are actually working in the IT industry while studying with us, which is terrific. And we underpin all these qualifications with the industry qualifications that we deliver as part of the learning and the units in those qualifications. So I'll come back to one of these later when I talk about that. So the session scope, as I pulled out from the study design, in Applied Computing Unit 2, Outcome 2, had these elements in the network security topic area, which is something you already know. And it had these elements in the data analytics Unit 4, Outcome 2, which you can also easily find. And it had these elements in the cybersecurity, software security outcome in Unit 4, Outcome 2 in software development. So I try to pick up all of those elements and give you some information about each one and some demonstrations, and then some tools at the end to use them in the classroom. So because of the time issue, I'm going to perhaps fly through some slides and take slightly longer with some of the others, and I'm conscious of not running over time and allowing time for questions. So if you're keen, you can look at live maps of current attacks in our world at any point in time. If you go to that site, you'll find 15 live cyber attack maps for visualizing digital threats and incidents. And the jury's out as to how useful these are, but I think they're interesting, and they give you insights on some of the actual malware that's out there and the attack modes and the attack vectors, if nothing else. Australia was the 22 most attacked country when I was doing this about 5 days ago. Number one, anyone want to guess who number one was being attacked? No answer? Russia. So seems to be the number one target. One way to think about network security is to look at threat, vulnerability, and risk. So you need to define these terms. And so this slide attempts to do that. You've all got copies of these slides, so I'm not intending to read through every sentence in every slide, but just to give you an overview. So the risk is the likelihood that a threat will exploit a vulnerability of an asset and result in an undesirable consequence. And that's the intersection with that Venn diagram of those three areas: the threat, the asset, and the vulnerability. Where they intersect is where your risk is, which is the likelihood that a threat will exploit a vulnerability of an asset. The attack surface is another concept that we talk about, which is really how much is the target, how big is the target. So attack surface is a total sum of all vulnerabilities. That's open ports, applications, wireless connections, users. And the attack surface is expanding due to the fact that we've got a lot of fragmentation. We've got remote workers, we've got BYOD, we've got Internet of Things. And so the attack surface keeps on growing for threat actors. The SANS Institute describes three components of the attack surface, and we'll talk about network security organizations a bit later. The network attack surface, the software attack surface, and the human attack surface. So common network security terms, as we've discussed: threat, vulnerability, mitigation, and risk. You can actually find current risks on a number of sites that will give you a common vulnerability scoring system. So if you have an older version of Moodle, or you've got an older operating system that hasn't been patched, you can actually find, based on the version and the particular application or the operating system, what the ratings are for the vulnerabilities that they present, if they're public facing, or even if they're internal, what they can present to an internal threat actor. So that's just some information about, how critical things are, or how high or low the risks and the vulnerabilities are. And this was just on the 16th of October, as I was just checking my normal news websites, a VPN vulnerability with the descriptor that it's the gift that keeps on giving to attackers. There's always a VPN vulnerability around the corner, or a recent one that's been reported. And that was recently presented, and apparently no one was actually breached. No organization was breached, but the patch was sent out very quickly to block it to patch the vulnerability. So when you want to talk to students, there's no shortage of live vulnerabilities or very recent ones that you can present that will make it very easy to teach the value of being up to date with network security. So there's different vectors of network attacks. They could be external or internal, and we'll be looking at some of those. And the biggest one is obviously manipulating people with social engineering, and having poor policies and poor implementation and poor auditing and reviewing of what is actually happening. You can have great policies, but if you're not enforcing them, then what's the value of that? So there's a whole range of things, from removable media. So you could leave a USB with malware that can lie around and someone can plug it in and off we go, and you can have the whole organization be attacked by a ransomware attack vector. So there are a lot of vectors of data loss and attack. A couple of terms you're well aware of: white hat hackers, grey hat hackers, black hat hackers. White hat hackers are the good guys that try and help you by having the authority to check the security of your network and to give you advice on how to patch them, any vulnerabilities. Grey hats are kind of a bit more political or perhaps socially driven in terms of what they might be doing. And black hat hackers are the really bad guys who just want to attack for gain, and that could be it could be a country, it could be an individual, it could be anybody. So grey hat and black hat are threat actors. White hat are the good guys. The threat actors have evolved from the sort of even inexperienced script kiddies can now do damage. State-sponsored ones are huge. You can read about Stuxnet if you're keen, how the Iranian nuclear weapons or power program was attacked by a virus that everyone denies was actually released, but apparently it's attacked the refinement process of their various nuclear program activities, which is very interesting. There's a documentary on that online on TV as well on how that happened. So you got cyber criminals, hacktivists, who will just attack for the sake of a principle or a particular social value or some other driver that they'll use. Vulnerability brokers are those who actually will check if there are exploits on your system and actually ask you if there's a reward for helping you to secure your network, and so they're out there. So the issue with attack tools is that in the earlier days, the technical knowledge needed had to be very high to use attack tools, and the sophistication of the tools was quite low. So the technical knowledge had to be very high to apply that. Now the technical knowledge can be quite low because the attack tools are so sophisticated. A whole bunch of security testing tools, password crackers, wireless hacking, packet sniffers, and I'll demonstrate some of these a little bit later, vulnerability scanners, and so on. So there are a lot of these tools that are out there that can be used very easily. Categories of attack tools, again, denial of service, man in the middle, sniffers, eavesdropping, etc. And types of malware: a virus, a worm, a Trojan horse. So typically a virus requires human action to actually enable it. And a worm will generally install itself and make copies on all available mapped network drives that you have access to, and then start to propagate that way without any intervention by the person. And the Trojan horse, as the name suggests, is something that's got malicious software hidden inside a gift or a harmless looking piece of software or an application. So if you're keen, you can actually download a test virus that is harmless from the EICAR website. Your antivirus software will probably obliterate it. It's about a 52-character string. You can copy and paste that from the website and just make it text file on your desktop to see if your virus scanner will automatically pick it up and quarantine it or delete it. So you can check for a harmless test virus that all virus scanning companies have agreed to put onto their virus definitions to be collected or picked up by the virus scanning. Viruses can lay dormant and activate at a specific date or time, requires human action to insert malicious code into another program. Trojan horses, a whole bunch of them, not just one, and they can do a whole range of things that are damaging and destructive. So just watching the time, I'll keep on moving. You've got these, you can look them up. Worms, examples of the code red worm. It is some years ago now, but it was extremely virulent that went around the world and caused havoc. Worm components, enabling, propagating, and the payload components as to what it actually does. Modern malware. This list is as long as your arm. Spyware, adware, scareware, phishing, rootkits, as you would already be familiar. Common behaviors of malware. Often when malware is being detected, that will be extracted and put into a sandbox to run in a virtual machine that's isolated, so you don't risk infecting the rest of your organization. And the behavior of the various processes and the and the operating system components and the hardware will be monitored. So if it's using a lot of RAM, using a lot of memory, if it's starting to affect resolution of your domain names that are being accessed, etc., and that's how it's actually studied in order to see whether it's whether it is actually malware or if it's doing anything harmless or extremely harmful. Network attacks. So there's lots of attacks, as you would well know. SYN floods. A SYN flood is part of a three-way TCP handshake. So it's a SYN packet is the first packet that goes when there's a TCP link establishment taking place, and it requires an acknowledgement to come back, and then it requires so it's a three-way process. And what a SYN flood does is before the reply comes back, it just keeps on sending the SYN packets to overwhelm the other side, and that can cause denial of service. A Smurf attack is also an attack where there is a denial of service outcome, and that's an example of, it was named Smurf because lots of little ICMP ping packets caused a massive amount of disruption to the target machine. Before you can do anything with cybersecurity, you need to have an idea of what you are up against, and that requires reconnaissance. So you query the target, you look up the domain name, you look at the IP addresses, you can do a ping sweep of the target to see which IP addresses are responding. You can do a port scan to see which IP addresses and ports are open and what applications they're running. They might be running an older version of a web server that you could exploit, or it could be a mail server, it could be anything. You can also run vulnerability scanners, etc. You can then attempt an access attack, which can be trying to do anything like, if it's got an SQL server, you can attack maybe with an SQL injection, or if it's a website that's not being up to date, you can maybe do cross-site scripting, which we'll look at in a minute. Social engineering attacks, the most common, and again, there's lots of these and they're very interesting. Pretexting is when you try and make contact with a target to try and see if there's someone replying that you can then attempt to manipulate. Spamming, phishing, offering something in return for something else, tailgating, baiting, visual hacking is when you pretty much follow somebody and you watch them working, also known as shoulder surfing. Phishing, you may or may not be aware of these terms. Spear phishing is targeting a specific individual, and whaling is when you're spear phishing but on a high value target, like a senior executive or someone with a lot of authority, that once you exploit that person, you'll be able to get access to more of the internal resources. Farming by compromising DNS services or DHCP servers. Watering hole, phishing, and smishing, where you are doing a phishing attack using SMS instead of email. So moving right along, denial of service is pretty much where you overwhelm a target. So just conscious of the time as it's running away. DDoS attacks where you can use zombies to point towards a target to have multiple points of attack source from which it's attacking. Password sniffers. So let's watch this. This is a Wireshark. Your copy might have a H in the Wireshark. Ignore. It's Wireshark, which is free to download. Here is how we capture a password that's being sent across the network internally. And it's, in this case, a clear text password. It's a website that's not encrypted. So here we are. If you look at that, we've captured the credentials. The username is admin and the password is RTS3, etc. The source is 192.168.1.55. The destination is 192.168.1.1. It's a HTTP GET request, and we've captured the password. Moving right along. Okay, to cross-site scripting. Can be complex. There are many types of these. It's pretty much injecting some JavaScript into a website. So let's look at an example of a basic one. Here's a basic injection where you have perhaps a blog or an online comment submission. So here you go. You've said, Bob says hello, and then we're putting some, if you can all see that here, putting some JavaScript. And that becomes a permanent part of the page because it's in the database. So there you go. So even though you go to that website with the same URL, now you're getting a different behavior from that website based on what you injected through the JavaScript option there. So we go to the next one. The advanced, just keep an eye on the website, rt-cyberhost/xss.php, and watch what we do with a tool called Beef, which is a package that you can run for exploiting websites with cross-site scripting. Let's check that out. I'm sorry it's a little bit small, but hopefully you can make it out. So we inject a hook.javascript file, which is a pre-prepared one. We then indicate what we want to do by redirecting that web page, and it actually goes to a bodgy, a fake Gmail login page. It's still the same web address there, but now it's showing Gmail. And then when someone attempts to log in, it says it's failed, but we've captured their username and password through that fake page, through the Beef package that was used to inject cross-site script to exploit that particular browser. SQL injections are pretty much where you have code that is executed, which has been put into the input field, which should just be text or plain data. So let's have a look at that one. Let's do a simple one, a basic one, and just keep it, and I'll analyze this in a moment for you. So we're adding a customer with that hyperlink. We go through and we add that user. And shortly we will, though we only have the box, the text input field that says which customer ID would you like, we're going to now extract the whole database. So even though we've got the customer ID is 1,000, 10,000, what we've done is we've extracted the whole database. So how did we do that? All right, so what we did was, the SQL that was behind that page on the server was select customer ID, name, surname, street, suburb, postcode, state from customer, where customer ID equals, and we're expecting to get the input from that text box. But because that hasn't been sanitized or processed or validated, what we did was we injected, we've actually put in this string, single quote or 1=1 hash. And what that did was it converted this SQL statement to become close off the single quote for the customer ID. So customer ID is nothing, followed by or 1=1, which is always true, followed by hash, which means ignore everything else that goes after it, which then said, because it's true, we're selecting all customers. And the hash was the end terminating the SQL statement. So I hope that makes sense. Let's look at an advanced one. We've extracted the customers. Now we're going to extract the password of all passwords of all customers. Conscious of time here.
You've got 5 minutes.
Right, okay. So what we've done is we've extracted the password under the street field. So if we go to the advanced SQL statement, we use a union to join two parts of the SQL, where we are selecting the password as one of the fields instead of the street, and we are then printing that out. So just moving right along, that's what it would look like there. Man in the middle attack pretty much just says, okay, I am the target, I'm your gateway, I'm now telling you, user, that I am your gateway, and that's using an ARP spoof command, which actually tells the victim or the machine you're attacking that you are now the gateway, so it sends everything to you, and then you send it on to the gateway, so you're sitting in the middle to intercept everything going on. So moving right along, defending the network. Now, you might think there's one security officer in an organization, but in fact there are several, and they all have different roles, so you're welcome to investigate how they differ from each other. There are security organizations as these. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Authentication, integrity, and confidentiality. Authentication means you can be sure that you're speaking to Kevork, all right? That is what guarantees that I am who I say that I am. Integrity ensures that whatever you're receiving from me is actually what I'm sending. That's the integrity of the data sent. And confidentiality is that no one's listening into our conversation, though people are, but that's how you guarantee secure communication. And there are different protocols that attend to each of these categories of enabling security. Symmetric and asymmetric encryption, which you can read about later. Domains of network security. There's a whole infrastructure that goes around network security, not just one event or one policy, and your objectives. Mitigating network attacks. You've got to understand the network model, communication model, the layers to make sense of it, the protocols that run at each of these layers. Wireless. If I have a web key or a WPA2 personal key, I can give that to someone else, and we can have an infinite number of people connecting to the wireless access point. But if I set up a radius,
it seems we've lost Kevork, but as most of you, we were only 1 minute away from the end of his presentation anyway, so I think, and the slides are available. If he does come back on, if we just wait a minute or two, we'll just see if he is able to come back on and take questions. But if not, we were at the end of the presentation anyway. So, and I must say, Bernie, having not taught VC for so long, I imagine that that really engages kids, the cybersecurity stuff.
Yeah, in particular, I guess a lot of my boys are into that kind of area. And I think that there is a growing recognition of the protective side. You know, there's been lots of fascination around the offensive hacking side of things, but I think there is greater appreciation for ethical hacking, blue teaming, where organizations come in and pit like a team of ethical hackers against a team of internal people trying to respond and protect, and there's lots of more accessible, practical ways to display it. So some of those videos that Kevork had are things that you can kind of play out in real time and get students to experiment with in class.
Just give me 2 seconds.
Along with your plug for Life Journey, Kev, I might also plug a couple of other local organisations that are good in this space. ASA, the Australian Information Security Association, they're trying to get more content out to junior levels, and RuxCon is more on the kind of looking at the penetration testers, ethical testing stuff. So it's a conference that runs every year, and RMIT run like a offshoot of that quite regularly, but it's really good for kids who are into capture the flag and stuff as well.
No, it looks like
Like
that's it.
I'll just annotate some of Kevork's slides, and he might want to correct me via chat, because I really like this idea as well. I use VirtualBox in my classroom and run up a bunch of different VMs, and I challenge students to correct all the mistakes that Kevork was just talking about. So, you know, introduce SQL injection vulnerabilities and ask students how they would fix them. Same with cross-site scripting. If you download Kali Linux onto, and you know, do this in an isolated network. So when I talked to my techs at school, they gave me some old computers. I took it off the network, so no wireless connection, and I just have them connected in a little trolley that I can take around the school, and I run up a bunch of stuff. Let's have a look at his second slide. Network security components, find them fast. Yeah, very good. So again, like if you've got a computer, lots of ways that we can run up a virtual firewall, an IDS in Snort, or Security Onion, and then Kali. Doing some packet sniffing. So I think in the first sessions today, we had some people who'd started with Wireshark, which is a really good place. Nmap. So even on your normal computers at school, as long as you're talking to your techs and they're aware you're doing it, using Nmap to scan a network, or, you know, kind of fingerprint another host. So you can use Nmap and point it towards an IP address, maybe a server in your school, and you can see what type of software is running on there, and maybe identify open ports that maybe shouldn't be open. Loic and Hoik are different types of tools that are used to run denial of service attacks. Recent malware attack examples, fantastic. So malware traffic analysis, if you want to grab a couple of links there. One thing I really use quite commonly as well is Cuckoo. So Cuckoo is like a sandbox that Kevork was talking about them earlier. You can run that up in a virtual machine, or you could chuck. Yeah, cool. So VulnHub is one I referenced earlier. That first one, Deacon's University ethical hacking site. So if students want to step through these different activities, and Kevork's kindly listed his contact details as well. You know, if there are questions we haven't addressed, please get in touch, and we'll pass on questions to Kevork.
I'm just wondering, Kevork, could one of your students hack you?
I don't know, but I think the answer is anyone can be hacked, you know, and that's the power of social engineering. And I think it's really on all of us to realize that we're all vulnerable, and, you know, we're trying to do our best to be aware of that and be mindful.
Thank you, Bernie, for stepping in. And Kevork, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. It seems to be, I'm assuming, your end, but yeah, very good, very entertaining and involving presentation.